For 1 and 8, you never stop training. You're always training just to make sure stuff stays. You're doing stuff every month to make sure you're good to go. Nothing in your knowledge lapse, stuff like that.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in and watching another episode of the Forever Winged podcast. For those of you who are on the audio version, thank you so much for plugging in your headphones and joining us. Today, I'm really excited to have Staff Sergeant Shahannah Boykin online right now to talk to us about the 1N8X1 AFSC, which is the Targeting Analyst AFSC. And the main reason why I'm really excited about this is that there's not really too much information on the 1N8 AFSC. So I'm super excited to have you on the show, Shahannah. So welcome. Kicking it right off, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, where you hail from, and why you decided to enlist in the Air Force.
Okay, well, I'm an Army brat, so I moved a lot. I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, at Tripoli Army Medical. My dad retired 20 years and 9 days, as he will tell you if you were ever to ask him how long he was in. I went to MEPS out of OKC in Oklahoma. So I remember my original plan was I'm going to be a Marine because one of my buddies in high school was a Marine or had just got back from his basic military training. And I was like, man, I want to do what he did. That sounds so cool. And my dad was like, absolutely not. And I was like, okay, well, what about the Army? He's like, you're not doing that either. I was like, okay, cool. Let me go take the ASVAB, see what score I get, and I'll join the Air Force then instead. And so far, it's been a great decision of my life. So I joined right out of high school. Like I've had signed my contract like before I graduated a few months, and then went later that fall to get to base military training. So
nice. So Hawaii, and then you went over to Oklahoma City. So what's the story behind the switching in the process and moving over to Oklahoma City?
So my dad retired out of Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So I think it was near Lawton, Oklahoma. And then we decided to move up to Ponca City, Oklahoma, because my dad got a job up there. He was a HVAC mechanic in the Army. He got another job doing HVAC once he retired because the man has to stay busy. So he's like, okay, let's move up here. So me, my mom, and my brother, we all moved up there. And I think I got there in 5th grade, 6th grade. And me and my brother had been homeschooled most of the time there our whole life until then. And then we started going to public school, which was a lot different, right? Of course, from sitting at home and doing all your schoolwork being done at noon, getting to play and stuff afterwards. So yeah, he retired out of Fort Sill. We moved up to Oklahoma, Ponca City, Oklahoma. And then that's where I went through middle school, went to high school there, and graduated.
Oh, that's nice. So I'm actually from Oklahoma, or at least that's the state that I claim. Born in California, and then we moved over in the high school time frame. And so I was in the west part of Oklahoma in the real small town called Texoma. It's about 900 people. And then the nearest MEPS to us was actually Amarillo, Texas. So it was pretty far away. So it's good to see another Okie out there.
Yeah. Yep. I'm definitely Okie. I lived there for 11 years of my life. So yep. That's kind of where I call home.
Nice.
But not so much now. My parents moved to Texas, and my brother went to college there at UNT. So I kind of call Texas my home now. It's where if I go home for leave, that's where I'm going, is East Texas. So
Gotcha. Yeah, we used to live over in Denton, Texas too. So we're very familiar with UNT.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were thinking about enlisting in the Marine Corps, and your dad was in the Army. So why specifically the Air Force, other than your dad's influence?
I always heard good things about the Air Force. So my aunt and uncle, they were currently in when I joined. They were master sergeants, actually at Goodfellow Air Force Base, where I went to tech school. Surprisingly enough, that I realized they were there when I got there. I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I remember before we even went to kind of go talk to the recruiter, my dad had me call his sister-in-law, my aunt, and I asked her just a bunch of questions about hey, how do you like the Air Force? I'm kind of thinking of doing that. And she's like, oh, absolutely. Let's get you going. Think about this. These are the questions you're going to ask the recruiter, make sure your dad comes with you. And I was like, oh, I wasn't going alone. So yeah. So they were definitely a big influence as well. And then when my dad came with me, as soon as I mentioned that I had aunt and uncle that were in the Air Force, the recruiter was like, oh, that's awesome. Let's definitely get you in here. Let's get you going. So I was very excited.
Nice. Awesome. So from the time that you decided to enlist in the Air Force and the time that you shipped off to basic training, how long were you in the delayed enlistment program?
I was in it for either 9 or 7 months. So I signed my contract in March of 2015, and then I shipped out September 1st of 2015.
Okay.
But I believe I was already in the DEP program before I found out what my job was going to be in March when I signed my contract. So I think it was like January of 2015.
Okay.
So I was like still in high school, like went to prom knowing I already had like, a career waiting for me before I even like graduated.
So from the time that you found out what your job was to the time that you shipped off to basic training, how long was that gap in the delayed enlistment program?
And then later enlistment program, it was so March to September, 6 months.
Okay, so you found out your job in March and then you shipped
Yeah.
off in September.
Yes.
Got it. So that's a long time to be doing a lot of research on the job that you were selected for. That's pretty cool. What were some of the resources that you used to try and research your job at that time?
So honestly, I didn't have many. All I knew was it was intel of some kind. I knew that I was going in as a 1 in 8. Well, actually, back then, it was the 1 in 1 career field, but I didn't know there were shreds until I was like halfway through BMT. That there was an Alpha variant and a Bravo variant. So all I knew was this intel. So I remember I reached out to my aunt on my mom's side, who did Army intel. I can't remember exactly what her job is. Um, and she said like that was definitely the best route for me, just because of like if I'd ever decide to get out, I'd have something to come with me, a clearance and experience and a very like specific type of job. I didn't really have much to look at to know what the job was going to be about. I do remember going through like the Airman's Creed and like the Air Force song and like trying to make sure I was ready to go as possible for basic military training. I was trying to I was working out with my dad like every day. He was trying to get me to do push-ups and sit-ups. So I remember there'd be some days after dinner we do push-up contests. He could still beat me even to this day. The man's a monster. So, so just like getting ready for like the physical aspect of it, because I was like not really an athlete in high school. Like I played like sports like outside of the school, like with your friends or whatever, or like at my church group, we'd have like we had a gymnasium where we did our like youth group at. So I played basketball with everybody and stuff like that. So I wasn't like an athlete per se, but I knew I needed to be ready physically as well. So yeah, just doing a lot of working out, trying to read up on like maybe some history about the Air Force. Didn't know how much that would come in handy with the test and basic military training, just to know like all the history of it. But just the Airman's Creed, like trying to memorize that. So when I got there, I wasn't embarrassing myself. Yeah, just things like that.
That's great. So what was your basic training experience like? Was it difficult?
So I remember the first night was, of course, very difficult. That was my first time really being away from home, away from my parents and stuff. I remember I don't think I've cried that much in my life just because I was so nervous and scared and really didn't know what I was getting into necessarily. I remember I snuck my phone out to text my aunt, because at the time they were at San Antonio station there, and I was like, "You gotta come get me," and she was like, "No, I can't. You signed a contract. I will go to jail if I come get you." And I was like, "Please, just please come get me." And then after like the second day when I actually had some sleep, right, because I got in really late that night, we started getting to know some of my like flight mates and my flight and stuff, and we were all just as nervous as everybody else. So we're like, okay, well, let's just get through this together. So the first few weeks were great, and then I ended up having an injury. I got a runner's knee, they call it. So just like it eventually progressed into tendonitis later in my career, but I ended up having to be moved to MedHold, the medical like hold flight, to like get some physical therapy done and stuff like that. So I left in my 4th week of BMT, I believe, and then I was in MedHold for 5 weeks. And I remember the doctor kept asking me like every week when I would come in to do like a checkup to see if I wanted to go back to line flight or back to the basic military training flight. Did I want to? Like I had the option, like you can just get out now because you haven't got that far, or you can go back and finish this. And I was like, well, I signed all this paperwork. I'm gonna finish it. So I remember when I got done with my 5 weeks and they sent me back to a new flight, and the same week I had just came from. So that was also just as nerve-wracking as the first day I got there, because there was all new girls I had to meet, and I had just been kind of out of pocket out of all the training. I wasn't really doing as much as the physical stuff because I had the injury. I had to kind of like turn back time a little bit with that. But my new flight was amazing. They helped me get ready. They got me back into studying, got me back physically ready to be able to pass my test at the end of the whole training. They were an amazing flight. I still think about those girls fondly. Like they really helped me kind of come out of my shell a little bit because I was a very shy kid. Like didn't really talk to very many people. Only person I would talk to was my brother. And he's like a year and a half younger than me, and he's very outgoing. Everyone knows his name, and I'm like, I'm Shahannah. I'm his big sister, not little sister. Um, you wouldn't believe seeing the height difference between us. He's like 6'8", so and I'm only 5'8", so a whole foot difference. I'm like, yeah, I'm the big sister, you know. Yeah, so having that new flight like really helped me like get like kind of buckled down again, and like I'm gonna do this. I remember when I graduated, one of the best feelings I think I've ever had, just because I knew how hard I had to work to get there to finish it. Of course, still nervous about what was coming next because I didn't quite know yet. Still really don't know much about the job. There's no girls in my flight who got my job. They got the other shred. They got the one in Alpha shred, and I got the one in Bravo. So we all were kind of like, I don't know what's going to happen, but we know we're intel. Cool. We're apparently the nerds of the Air Force, which is true now that I've been in it for so long. But yeah, my parents came, my brother came. I remember I hugged my brother and I just cried because like he was my buddy, you know, growing up. So yeah, and my aunt and uncle actually came. They came in their blues, you know, this mass sergeant is around me. I'm like, whoa, wait a second, I'm still new to, you know. So that was fun. But yeah, I also graduated on like a Thanksgiving weekend, so I got an extra day instead of just the 4 days you normally get to like be with your family and stuff. So that was also cool. So kind of nice how that kind of worked out. Also, I remember, so I had my original like graduation date that happened during MedHold. My parents were still able to come out because they had already bought the tickets. So I was able to do like a base pass and be able to go around the base with them. Of course, I still had to wear my like kit and gear and stuff that I would wear if I was a trainee because I still was, but they still were able to come. So that was also a big motivator for me too. I was like, they came on the date I was supposed to graduate. They got to come back again in a month, you know, like I'm going to make this happen. So yeah, it wasn't a terrible experience. The people around me were awesome. I still remember my military training instructors fondly. I know one of them is doing big things with like higher echelons of the Air Force. One's a chaplain. Like it's just really cool to kind of see where their career went and also see like how they shaped and molded me as well.
That's awesome. It sounds like a really, really good experience with the exception of the med hold at that point.
Yeah.
Do you think you can elaborate a little bit on just how you felt? You must have felt discouraged whenever you got put on med hold and then being taken away from the flight that you knew. And kind of the girls kind of became your family at that point, and then deciding to stick with the Air Force instead of getting out, and then kind of reindoctrinating yourself into a new flight. That must have been discouraging for you.
Yes, it was. Unfortunately, as well, during the first 4 weeks I was there, a few of the other girls had gotten sent to MedHold for other various reasons. So also just seeing like parts of my like new family being kind of like ripped away from me in a way is what it felt like. And then for me to be the next one, I was like, oh, I was like, I don't think I can do this. I had a lot of self-doubt in myself, and then getting to MedHold, and most of the people also felt that same way. So it wasn't a very happy environment. Right. You were definitely happy for the people that were able to go back or the people that were able to get out because that's what they wanted, you know, but you were just definitely very, very a sad place. Wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but it did help me understand that, hey, bad things happen. You got to be able to bounce back, you know? And it's also like the Air Forces. I remember when I went to sign my contract, the reason why I actually signed it in March instead of January, because I think I actually knew what my job was going to be then. And my recruiter was like, it should be coming up soon. So we thought it was going to happen in January. And I remember telling my dad, I was like, I know you can sign with me for this, for the contract and stuff. But I was like, I want to do it at 18 for me because I want to make sure it's my decision alone. And he, of course, respected that. And he was like, no, that makes sense. I mean, it's when you're in it for however many years you sign up for, you're in it. It's you, you know? So I'm glad my contract was able to be like finalized or whatever, ready to go by March because my birthday's in January. So I was like, I need to turn 18. So I make sure I make the decision for me. So very glad. Plus I didn't want to like say I get in right and I hate it. I didn't want to like hate my dad because, oh, you made me, you signed this thing with me, you know, you made me do all this. I'm like, no. So I was like, as long as it's my decision, I'll be fine with it. So yeah, just working through that was interesting, but yeah.
Nice. Do you have any words of advice for anyone who may be getting ready to ship off to basic training? or who may find themselves in that kind of medical hold situation. Because I can imagine that it feels like your whole world is just crashing down at that moment.
Yeah. My advice would probably be just like, just keep your head down and keep trying to study. Like study the material they give you to get ready for graduation. Try to get your fitness correct, because I know we still have weight requirements to get you in. Like make sure you're hitting the weight you need to be at. Make sure it's something you really want to do, right? Because this is a commitment. You're serving your country. If you are to get being med hold, try not to be discouraged. It's gonna happen, but try to think about where your career could go, like what's coming next. There's great things that will come next. You'll meet friends that will be friends for your whole life. Like I have friends I haven't really seen since then, but I still talk to them. We still able to connect about our shared experience. Yeah, just stick with it because it's going to be one of the best decisions of your life. In my opinion.
That's awesome. I appreciate that kind of that advice for those. I have no doubt. I've talked to 2 different people so far who found themselves in med hold, um, and I've talked to them since after that, and they were talking, and they used a lot of the same language. As you get down, depressed, you feel like everything's kind of just stopped and halt. But I think your advice is great, right? It's restack the cards, get your mind right, refocus on the things that you do have influence on, which is your memorization, your fitness, and stuff like that. So that's great advice. Okay, so now you graduate basic training, and you're heading down to San Angelo over at Goodfellow Air Force Base. Can you tell us a little bit about your tech school experience or the what you learned as the 1 November 8?
Yes. So I remember getting on the bus. So it's funny when you get to BMT, you go into the gateway to the Air Force. It's like an arch there. It should still be there. I know it was there when I was there. And that's the same place you also get on the bus to go to your tech school from. So I remember going on this bus. I think it was like a 3-hour drive. I remember when I had joined, my favorite band had put out a new album. So the whole ride there, I'm just listening to this album on repeat. Like, oh man, I miss like having my stuff back, my music and everything. I was still shy, so I really didn't talk to anybody on the bus. But I remember getting there. The in processing took a few hours because it was so many of us that had gotten there all together. And I got there like maybe the week before Christmas. So at first I was doing like orderly duty. So like making sure the dorms were clean, the outside was clean, just stuff like that. Kind of keep us busy because we weren't in class yet. We didn't know when our date was starting. And there's a thing called Exodus, which is where if you get to like your tech school at a certain time, you get to take your leave that you only kind of really learned about just a little bit. You get to take your leave to go home for, the holidays. So I remember I get there, I'm there for maybe 4 days, kind of doing orderly stuff around the dorms, cleaning up, just kind of getting used to my new roommates because they had been there for a few months. They were also different jobs than me. And then went home for the holidays. I got to see my family real quick. I just saw them a month before, but that was great getting to see them get kind of remotivated, right? Get to see my friends who are still there. Like, hey, what do you guys have been up to the past, for almost 4 months I've been gone, stuff like that. Then I came back and then I think I was doing orderly still for maybe another week or so. And we actually started on my birthday. My class did January 7th. So from there, we got started to like our basic intel blocks, kind of like a foundation little classes in between to like get us ready to understand like how the intel works, period, like kind of how the FBI works, what they do, NASIC, CIA, stuff like that. And then that took about, I actually don't remember how long it took, maybe 5 weeks or so, just to like, there's a lot more stuff that goes into it, of course, but just like learning like how to classify things correctly because you have to protect secrets now, right? You signed an NDA that you have this clearance now, you can't talk about this stuff forever and ever, amen, right? So they were, because like, I was barely 19, right? And I'm learning all this stuff. I had to protect all this stuff, I was like, I've never had to like put a classification thing on anything, I just write what I'm going to write and, let it lay where it lays. But now I have to make sure it stays in a certain type of building and stuff like that. So that was really cool to like learn that. I thought it was really interesting. I still am kind of into that stuff. I'm like, this is really cool. Like this is stuff I get to see because I'm allowed to by the government, like, this weird nerdy stuff like that. But yeah, so the first beginning of it wasn't terrible because it was like basic understanding of stuff. They're like, hey, you need to know this to help you with your stuff later. And then we started kind of getting into the meat and potatoes of our job, which was honestly very interesting. I'm still amazed to this day that that's what I learned. And it's something I know now of how to do the job. We learned like target system analysis. how to weaponeer, what kind of bombs we have in our inventory, what they can do damage wise, how to drop geospatial points, stuff in the geography to know where the bombs are going to go, stuff like that, to how to look for collateral objects in an area if we're going to attack something. Like just really got really down into the meat and potatoes. And I remember at the time, my tech school was 6 months. And about the last 2 weeks were like a capstone exercise, like a end exam where you kind of put all the stuff you've learned together with like everybody that graduates with you. You get to kind of work as a team, and like you share your knowledge about your specific thing you're learning about that you're targeting, and you get to share that information with the rest of the folks. And you're working with the officers now that are brand new as well to intel, and then the 1N0s you're working with, and the 1N1 alphas, so you're imagery analysts. So it was just very cool to kind of see it all come to an end and kind of see, oh, this is how my job actually works. Of course, it's in a very like looked after environment, right? Like it's very much like, this is where you can make your mistakes, so let's learn the mistakes now to learn from them, right? Which I think was great, because of course now when you're in your job for real, like this stuff really matters. So being able to kind of like learn that and take the mistakes I did and learn from them and get feedback about them was really great. Yeah, but it was a long tech school. I remember when I got to the capstone exercise, I walked home one day because I was crying because I thought I was going to fail. I was like, Dad, I called my dad. I was like, I'm not going to graduate. This is the end of it. You're going to send me home. And it was just because they're putting you under stress to understand, like, your job, you are dealing with like human lives, like you have to be on top of your stuff. And I mean, I ended up passing, it was fine. I was fine. They were just trying to teach me that lesson. Like, hey, your stuff, what you say matters. What comes out of your mouth is important, right? So you got to be correct with it. So it was just a really cool experience. I remember when we graduated, we were in like the movie theater at Goodfellow Air Force Base, and they had like our names and like where we were from on there and like where we were going, because I believe about 4 months in, I found out what my first assignment would be, which was Langley, Virginia. And so having to see like where I'm coming from, after I've joined, and also here's where I'm going, and now I have all these tools to take with me, was really cool. My uncle was able to come to my graduation. During tech school, I also got to see him retire, so get to see his career kind of end, and then mine beginning was really cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah, so I also got to see my family a second time there as well. So it was just really cool. I was able to see my family a lot during the first bit of my career. So if you can get your family to come out there and see you, I say absolutely do it. You will have time. It'll help you kind of breathe from the stress and the work you're doing, the training you're doing. So yeah, that's kind of my experience.
So I think you made some great points, right? And that's, you're 19 years old, straight out of high school. You think you know how to learn until you put in kind of an accelerated course like what the Air Force does. For all the different career fields that they teach you from the ground up. If you're going to be a maintainer, right, they're going to teach you what a wrench is. If you're going to go into the intel field, they're going to teach you the basics of how the intelligence community operates, right, how information flows throughout the community. But it's an accelerated course that it tends to be very, depending on the AFSC, it could be really stressful with the amount of information that you're expected to learn. And they're using language in terms and acronyms that you are not familiar with.
Yeah, like never heard before, not in an action movie, nothing. Yeah.
Exactly, right? So it is a constant, intense learning environment. When I was in tech school, I was in the 1 Charlie 3 career field, which was the command post career field. And it was only 6 weeks long. And during our final exercise for graduation, I actually failed it. And I thought I was going to fail out of the career field itself. And I was like, you get this stigma of career fields that they're only 6 weeks long, that they're super easy. And it was not easy for me. So even at 6 weeks being a Pop-Tart, it was extremely difficult. It was mostly comes down to the intensity of the information and just the amount of information and the type of information. This was I didn't know the difference between an enlisted and an officer. Let alone know how, nuclear decision making is done within the United States. Tell me a little bit about what are your thoughts on San Angelo and the area? You were there for 6 months. Were you able to get off the installation any?
So yes, I was, but not that much. Still very shy. I only talked to my roommates when I had to. My classmates, we were also a small class of like 7 of us. And we all kind of just had our own things we wanted to do, and we really didn't talk to each other. I would say we were not fans of each other that much. So I went off base a few times. Mostly what I would do is I'd go to the mall, I get lunch and buy a pair of Vans. And then I walk over to like behind or in front of the mall was a movie theater. And I just watch a movie every weekend pretty much. I call my parents before, talk to them for a few minutes in the lobby, then buy a ticket to see a movie and watch a movie and then take the red ball taxi back to base. Just kind of stayed in my room mostly. I mean, a DFAC, I went to DFAC a few times, went to the gym. Man, I didn't do much in tech school, like outside of base. Like I did go downtown a few times with a few of the friends I made, like inside the dorms. They were like showing me around because they had been there a little bit longer than I had. So they're like, hey, let's show you around town and stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. So I when we were going to the restaurant Twisted Root, they have really good burgers and shakes there. Seeing like the downtown, there was like coffee shops and like there was a bull or a cow that had like a bunch of different colors and stuff on it that people would go and like take pictures with. When it was my birthday, my aunt and uncle came and got me off base, and they took me out to a Mexican restaurant for I wore like a sombrero when they sung me happy birthday. Stuff like that. I went hung out at my aunt and uncle's house a few times with my nephew. So that was really cool. Or cousin rather, not nephew. Yeah. Because he was still young, and now he's like a teenager now, so that's weird to see too. Because I'm like, wow, they've like left the Air Force already, and he's like a teenager now. This is crazy. But yeah, I really didn't do much. Kind of just stayed in my room watching like TV or whatever. Calling my friends back home, stuff like that. But yeah, the area was nice though. Not a lot to do, but you were fairly close to like Austin or San Antonio or Houston. A few people would take like weekend trips to those places. Just a few hours drive. For being from the Midwest most of my life, a long drive means nothing to me. I'll drive 14 hours, no problem. So look, 2-hour trips, 3-hour, 4-hour trips is nothing. But I know a few people did that. I don't think I ever went to like Dallas or San Antonio or anything like that. Just kind of was like trying to stay home and like either go study at the schoolhouse in the building or just staying in my room saying to myself, wish I had went out and did more. But yeah, but I was also 19, right? So I wasn't going to be going out drinking anywhere. So and that's what a lot of the people that I was around, they were like 21. So they were going out and drinking. I was like, well, I can't go with you. They won't even let me in. So why would I go?
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so really didn't do much. I've kind of say to myself, I'm very much a homebody even now. So just kind of staying home, doing what I want to do, watch some TV or whatever. So yeah.
Nice. Cool. So, okay, you graduate tech school now, and you got your assignment over to Langley Air Force Base. Tell us about that transition and kind of what your first experience was at your first duty station.
So I remember I got a flight from somewhere in Texas. I don't remember which airport it wasn't probably San Angelo, it's a small city. But I remember I flew into Norfolk, Virginia. My sponsor picked me up. She had been there for about 2 years already, I think, or a year or so. She was great. I'm very glad I had her as a sponsor because she really showed me around, helped me break out of my shell, introduced me to people I worked with. I remember when I was on the interstate, we were passing the Coliseum, which is a big like venue here in Hampton. I remember pointing out, I was like, "What's that place?" She's like, "Oh, that's just where we go there and volunteer sometimes and run the food stands and stuff like that." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And now I've been to that place several times now. But I remember getting into the building and I was like, okay, this is weird. Now there's all these people and like they expect me to know my job. Of course, additional training does happen afterwards. Like you have to be certified in certain things and things like that. So honestly, for 1N8, you never stop training. You're always training just to make sure stuff stays. You're doing stuff every month to make sure you're good to go. Nothing in your knowledge lapse, stuff like that. My first year there was cool. Still didn't really do much, but I was definitely being more talkative at work. Like I started making friends. I believe 3 of my classmates actually came to Langley Air Force Base with me. One girl, she was reserved, so she was in our sister squadron that was like kind of attached to us. The other 2, we were like in all our training when we first got there. We all did it together, so that was cool. Ended up living with one of my classmates. We got a apartment out in Carrollton, Virginia. It was super nice there because it was quiet, but you had to cross the James River Bridge to get there. So that kind of sucked if they had it up and they were letting boats through. That was cool. I was only in the dorms for probably 8 months. I somehow got lucky. They were getting over capacity, so they pushed me off base. That's how me and him were able to get an apartment together. And we ended up rooming with one of our other friends. I believe he's a 1N2. He might be a 1N4. He actually ended up marrying my best friend a few years later. Somehow they got to talking on Facebook, and I was like, "Hey, I know this guy. He's good for you, you know." So yeah, but yeah. The first I was there for 4 years and 3 months. I got the chance to deploy in 2019 to Camp Arif John, Kuwait, which was funny enough that my dad was actually deployed there when he was in the Army. Of course, his experience was very different from mine because it's right when everything had started kicking off in that area, right? And they were using it to go to Iraq. So I remember the first time I called him, he's like, "Hey, is there mortars coming over?" And I was like, "No, Dad, I've been going off base to the mall and stuff." He's like, "What?" He's like, "This Air Force stuff is weird." I'm like, "I don't know what to tell you." Different times, different times. So that was a cool experience. I was there for 6 months. We normally do 6-month rotations when we deploy. That was fun. I was able to get a lot of job satisfaction out there. Really learned like it's just a little bit different things about my job. Also getting to work in a joint environment with the Marines and Army, and we had a few Navy guys that worked with us. It was just very cool to like see that, and actually getting to work with more civilians that worked for the government as well, that did our kind of not really our job, but they did help us with our job a lot because they're the guys that have been doing this for a long time, right? So they know the ins and outs of stuff. You can go to them for questions. So that was like my first 3 years there. Yeah, it honestly wasn't terrible. It's a good assignment. The area is great. I love my squadron. We were the Hawkeyes. My first commander was amazing. I know she's retiring soon. Very sad to see her leave the Air Force, but she's put her time in, right? A lot more time than was honestly necessary. 20 years, most people get out, but she's been in for a lot longer than that. So that was really cool getting to be under her command for my first assignment. Also, just being another female in the military and seeing someone being in that leadership role was really cool and really motivating as well. And then I had 2 more commanders after that. They were cool, really, really great. They took care of us. And then I remember I came back from my deployment in like October 2019. I hadn't tested for staff yet because I was out of cycle. So normally our cycle is like May to the June timeframe for that. Well, I was deployed those months. So they were like, "Well, you'll just test when you get back." I'm like, "Okay, sounds good." Of course, those 6 months I didn't study at all. Should have, but that was back then when our promotion rate was a lot higher. So I found out I made it in January because I tested in December when I got back. So I made it January of 2020. Didn't put on until April though, just because COVID, of course, happened 2 months later and everything kind of shut down. I remember going to Airman Leadership School like the mid of March. And I was only there for a week, got to know all my classmates. We were all like hanging out already and like doing little study groups and stuff. And then the commandant comes in. There was the leader of Airman Leadership School. She comes in. She's like, "Hey guys, we got to send you back to your units because COVID's like kind of here now. We got to shut some things down." And I was like, "Dang!" So I had to come back to ALS later that year in peak COVID almost in June, and did it all over Zoom instead. So I have that unique experience as well. Luckily, half my class was able to come back, and they put us back in the same flight to be able to still like have that. We already knew each other, so that made it a little easier. And we had like one extra person who just got to the base and needed to go through the school as well. So yeah, doing that mostly on Zoom. The only being in the classroom for 1 hour every week was a little weird. I did my graduation not quite over Zoom, but I had to sit in my classroom and wait to be called kind of like one at a time to go get my diploma. Boo. Had a mask on in my photos. I was like, what a crazy life we were living. Yeah. And then in February of 2020, I found out that I had orders to Osan Air Base in South Korea, not North Korea, in South Korea. So the spin up for that PCS, permanent change of station, was really a lot because it's one of the biggest like PCSs you'll do in your career, just because it's very particular how you have to get there and training you have to do. So that it took me. I'm glad I had the time I did to get through that training, but it was also COVID, so a lot of things just weren't happening probably as fast as I would have wanted to, just because there's nobody in the offices to do them. They were at home teleworking because we couldn't be, within 6 feet of each other. Yeah, my time at Langley was great. I went to Osan and I think I got there November. I had to do a month of training before down at Hobart, Florida, at that Air Force base. That was cool, but also during COVID. So the first 2 weeks we were quarantined for 14 days. So I was in my hotel room doing everything on Teams. So that was interesting as well. Learning stuff through a computer again. I was like, wow, okay, here we go. Thanks, COVID. So did that, and then after the 2 weeks, we were able to go to the classroom for a few hours and kind of finish the training and stuff. That was probably one of my favorite trainings I've been to, just because it was also something different I hadn't got the chance to do yet in my career, which is working for an Air Operations Center, so the AOC. I went to the AOC out in Korea. Really cool experience. I was there for 2 years. The food there is great. The people are so hospitable. There's a lot of bars up there, so if you want to drink, that's cool too. Also just the area around there, like seeing their gardens, and you can hike there. Their hikes are so beautiful. It's just a beautiful country. So I was there for 2 years. The job there was really a kind of fast paced, but also kind of slow too. It just kind of depends on what was happening in like politics and stuff like that. Also ended up going from like a unit of like probably 200 people to then 500 people. That was a kind of a change. Granted, I only worked in with a certain team of my own with like other targeteers or 1N8s. So we had my flight was like 20 or 30 of us, and then the rest was like everybody else. So there was like Intel there, mostly Intel. I can't even tell you all the jobs. I know I worked with a few 1N0s all the time. A lot of 1N1s, the 14N career field, which is for the officers for Intel. Got to work with a lot of them. A lot of them are my friends. Got to work with the Operations Support Squadron a little bit. So the OSS, worked with the DGS, another Intel spot my job won't really go there just because we don't have a specialty there, but we do help them in other ways from other units. So yeah, big base, a lot to do in Korea, a lot more to do. I feel like, at least for cheap, like a lot cheaper, you can do stuff there than you can maybe in the States. But yeah, so that went there. I was there for 2 years. Then I got an assignment back to Langley. So that's where I'm at currently. Back with my same unit I was in before, 36IS. So nice. I'm a Hawkeye. Once a Hawkeye, always a Hawkeye. And then, so I've been here for almost 2 years, like a year and a half now. And I just found out I got an assignment back to the AOC in Korea. So I'll be leaving there.
Oh, get out of town. You're bouncing back and forth.
Yeah. So I'll be going there next year, the same place. So I'm very excited for that because I applied for it. What I really wanted is we use Talent Marketplace now. Not so much Equal Plus. They kind of like grandfathered that. They're kind of pushing that to the side. We're using a new system to apply for assignments and get picked for assignments. So that's really cool. Definitely suggest using the system that's given to you, right? Because nobody else will but you. But yeah, I'm able to go back there again. So very excited.
Nice. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about, you touched on that the 1 November 8th, you guys train a lot, that you're always training. Can you tell us a little bit about what your day-to-day activities look like, either through training or whenever you're, let's say, over in South Korea at the AOC, what your day-to-day might look like for that?
Normally, my day-to-day looks like, at least here at like Langley, like at a stateside base, like I'm at. You come in, you check your emails on your unclassed computers just to make sure you don't have any admin stuff you might need to be working on, like you have a medical appointment or paperwork you got to sign for something. From there, you'll get started on some kind of production. You'll be doing like your weaponeering or your points or your CDE or collateral damage estimation. That's at least what I do here. And it's what I did also the first time at Langley. Just getting stuff ready to be used if it ever comes to that. Just making sure that commanders all around in different AORs or air responsibility have options to go with out the gate. So if anything pops off, they're ready to go and you've already given them that option. And then the AOC was a little bit differently. I was more of a liaison between the AOC there with the South Koreans and the Reachback Squadron at Offutt Air Force Base. Just kind of making sure that the U.S. side kind of did their job and then making sure that it made sense to the Koreans. I was kind of like this, making sure that stuff was like flowing properly so that at the end, the commander could have all the options he needed. So I was able to have a lot more meetings with my South Korean counterparts, which is really cool because they always brought snacks to the meetings, which I thought was really dope. They always had like some kind of coffee or some kind of juice that you'd never heard of, but it was amazing. Or like their candy was even different, right? Really good candy. Like their chocolate even tastes better. I don't know. So we always had meetings about maybe once a week, kind of make sure we were all aligned in our missions. and going forward. We also have exercises out there, of course, to like make sure we stay on top of like if something were to happen, how we're going to do it. Make sure we're doing all the things correctly and getting our reps and sets in, as we always say nowadays. So that was a little different than from like being back at Langley, because now, so when I left there, I was a staff sergeant, but I didn't have like any troops or subordinates underneath me. So I was kind of just like, kind of felt like a floater a little bit, but also I was leaving, so it was kind of okay to be a floater. So when I left, I had went from being like this senior airman that was like doing all the work, really getting in the weeds with it, to then get to the AOC, being more of a liaison, still in the weeds with work a little bit, but didn't have any subordinates under me still, except for maybe a couple, and that was only for a few months, and then they were moved to someone else. Then coming back to Langley, now I'm like a seasoned staff sergeant, right? So like you should know these things now. Here's some troops. And now I have troops now. I'm like, okay, now I have to worry about like my life, but also theirs. Make sure they're getting the stuff they need. Are you going to pass your PT test this month? Have you been working out? Here's this award package I'm writing for you so you can get recognized for the good work you've been doing. Like, in case they get in trouble, I'm there for that too, which has also been a little weird. I haven't had any that got in trouble so far, thank God. Hope that never happens, but I know it is a learning experience. So also, yeah, so going from like being like the technical expert a little bit to then being like, now you're the team lead, you're in charge of these guys doing the technical stuff, a little bit of a learning curve. I feel like I've kind of picked it up a lot sooner than maybe some of my other counterparts have, just because I really care about the people and taking care of them. And I still like try to get into the weeds with work as much as I can, just because I love this job. But yeah, making sure they're also still getting the training they need to get to the next rank and stuff like that. Like when I mentioned our monthly training, like we use like monthly tools to like keep us up to date on our currencies for like our certifications and stuff like that. We do a lot of weaponeering pretty much every day. Everyone kind of knows. Also, some of that stuff you just never forget, because these weapons are the same weapons. They're going to work the same way, but you also have to know how it's going to work with a different type of target, stuff like that. So we do trainings for that. Our training records feel like miles long, just because we have so much we have to stay on top of. But it's kind of fun, because you can also like take a break from just the can be kind of mind numbing, like sitting there doing production. Like, okay, this new stuff, just going to do it today. When I can also sit back and think, okay, what have I kind of lapsed on maybe the past month? Like I maybe need to relook at this, make sure I'm good in case this comes up next month. I need to make sure I know how to do it still, and I'm still following all the guidance that's been given to me by whoever. There's so many people that give us guidance, right? So making sure I'm staying on top of that and reading current stuff, new stuff that's came out, like making sure I'm aware of different changes that may have happened or may not have happened, or maybe I was tracking something that changed and it actually didn't, So doing that has been interesting. Yeah, but also just keeping up to date, like with what's happening in my like airmen's lives. Like I have one airman who's getting married now. I'm very excited for her. I'm like, okay, have you done this to make sure your paperwork's in order so you can change your name if you're going to? Stuff like that. Like I have an airman who's going through below the zone, so trying to put on senior airman sooner, 6 months sooner. This is like a program we have. If you want to put on the E4 rank faster, you have to put up a package and like do all this stuff to make sure you can get it. So I'm like doing that for him. So just making sure they're all good to go. And then, of course, making sure I'm good to go. But also for me, it's not even just my troops. I want to help all the airmen, because sometimes, we don't always have the NCOs around or staff sergeants or tech sergeants around. So we got to, if you're the only one there, you're helping everybody, which I love, honestly. Just being able to sit with them and figure out kind of what's going on with you. Like, what do you need help with? You need to find an answer. Let's find it together so you can remember it and then teach somebody else, stuff like that. But yeah, I feel like the biggest learning curve for me so far has been the going from the one being the very technical one to now being just the management of it, and like trying to make sure stuff gets done properly and as quick as possible, stuff like that. It's been very interesting for me, but I kind of like it, honestly. I do miss being the one getting in there doing all the work, but also I like being the one like, I'm going to make sure all this, however much stuff this is, gets done in a timely manner and with good quality work. So
yeah, that's great. So I think you're the type of supervisor that I think every airman wishes they had. Without a doubt, the fact that you care so much about your troops and that you're involved to that level, that's awesome. I think that's what it takes to be a leader, right? Not just a manager. And I think you've got that in spades, without a doubt. So there's no doubt you love the 1 November 8 AFSC.
yeah, I do. Glad I got
maybe,
it.
maybe Yeah, that's great. So I think that you probably would absolutely recommend that anyone coming in the Air Force that they would put the 1 November 8 on their AFSC list as one of the possible job options. Maybe you could touch real quickly on any of the cons or any of the misconceptions that people have whenever they come into the career field.
So I guess one con would be like we're a very small career field. So if you don't like seeing people you worked with before again later in your career, you're going to see them again. We're just a small career field. I don't really have an issue with that though. I've liked all the people I work with most for the most part. But we are a small career field. I'm trying to think, I remember a few years ago when I checked, we only had about 500 of us, which it seems like a lot. But when it looks at like what all we're doing, we're kind of a very specialized intel. Like a lot of the stuff we do, no other intel is going to be able to do it, which is how it is for other intel jobs as well. Getting used to being the people that like you're the only one here that knows how to do this specific thing, you got to make sure you know it, right? You can't be a BSer in this career field. It's you may get away for a couple times, but then they're going to catch on real quick like the boy who cried wolf. Like you're not being honest, you know. But yeah, so small career field. I mean, they're bringing bonuses back for our job. So if you're looking to also join and maybe get a bonus out of it, we're taking that as well. We're giving that as well. Trying to think. The job can be kind of monotonous sometimes because sometimes since you're so specialized, that's kind of the only thing you can do. But when you go to other types of units, so like an OSS or an AOC, you kind of get to step out of your wheelhouse a little bit and kind of learn some of the other things that other intel jobs are doing. So again, gives you more of a breadth of knowledge of like how you fit into the puzzle. Because there's so many little bits and pieces that go into intel, period, especially for the Air Force. But even getting to see your counterparts in the Navy and the Army, you get to see kind of that side of it too and how they run things a little differently. But yeah, I feel like the pros definitely outweigh the cons more because you're learning so much, and I'm a big learner. I want to know more. If you're willing to get in there and like get your head down and get into the books and get into the guidance and everything that can come out of this job is very rewarding, I think. Also, if you were planning to just do a one contract and get out, the possibilities are endless for you on the outside because you have this specialized thing that some companies that the Air Force works with wants to know about, you know, like they need that expertise. So yeah, I think it's definitely a job that people should put on their job dream sheet just because not just because we're a small career field and we need more people. Selfishly I'm saying we need more people, but also like it's a good job to have. I think in the Air Force you're definitely sought out more than probably some of the other jobs you could probably rattle off from the Air Force. So because they need us. So yeah, you'll feel important, that's for sure.
So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the jobs on the outside. What are some of the jobs that some of your peers or leaders have gone on to do once they left the Air Force?
So I know a few have worked for like some companies like Raytheon, or they even go to work with Boeing or any of those type of big companies. You can also go work for like NASIC, for example. You might not do exactly the job you've done while you were in, like you still will be able to do that specialized stuff, but being able to also just be the civilian that's in the workspace with the other airmen that are still in that need your expertise on a certain type of job, or a certain type of target, like a hardened target, something that's really difficult to defeat with a weapon. Like you could be that person that's there guiding them through the steps of how to actually get this thing defeated, right? You're not just specialized in what you were trained on, but also just like your expertise is huge because you've been there, you've done that. And a lot of the airmen, especially now I'm noticing, are coming in very brand new to like the workforce period, right? Like they're coming in at 18, 19, like I was. And now I'm like teaching them like, hey, well, this is how we're doing things now. It's going to be a little bit bigger than what you kind of got at tech school, maybe. Because now you're at your first job, you're going to learn how to do it and you're doing it today. You know, it's not like you're going to do it in a few weeks. You're doing it today. I wouldn't say it's like not a lot of hand holding, but you do have some hand holding as well with that. But being on the outside, you get to still work with the people you probably worked with before you got out, right? So be able to also connect with them, being that person that they can call you or email you, be like, hey, this is what I'm working on. What do you think about this? I know a lot of my friends get kick out of that. They're like, please stay in contact with me. Like I will help you with this problem because one thing is you won't know everything in this job. You won't be perfect at everything. But there's going to be somebody else that probably got out that did that thing a lot and they know it. And that's what their job is to do, is to like come and help you and figure that problem set out. So I know a lot of my friends who have gotten out have enjoyed what they've done. It may not be exactly like a targeteer type thing or targeting analyst thing, but you still get to bring that knowledge that you've learned and bring it to the table and be like, hey, so I know this, and this is why this stuff will work because I've done this X, Y, and Z, right? So yeah, hope that answered your question.
That's great. No, it absolutely did. And I really appreciate you talking about this career field. It sounds very intriguing without a doubt. And while I was at AFRICOM, we dealt a lot with our J2 and the targeting guys came into the Joint Operations Center a lot, especially when it came time to operations and stuff like that, but also in the planning phases and stuff. So it's good to learn a little bit more about the career field without a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Shahannah, this is the part of the episode where I try to ask our guests if they had a cousin, niece, nephew, sibling, son, daughter, whoever, come up to you and tell you that they're thinking about enlisting in the Air Force. What kind of words of advice would you give them before they set on their Air Force journey?
Well, honestly, first I'd tell them congratulations. It's a big thing to do, to even be willing to do that, because not a lot of people sign up for the military. What, less than 1% of the population do. So first of all, congratulations. It's a big decision to make, but it's going to be very rewarding. You're going to learn so much. I tell them to definitely like work on fitness, because we have to be fit to fight as well. That is not one of our core values, but it's definitely in one of the core values, like in the, the sub parts of it. Just being able to embody what it means to be an airman. We have this thing called the Little Brown Book. It explains what you should be doing at every rank in the Air Force. Read that, digest it, understand that this is what you're here to do, and this is why we need you. This is why you're making up the force. Do as much studying as you can. If you know someone who has that job, or if I do, like ask me, I'll try to get in touch with them and get them in contact with you so you can understand like kind of what you're getting into. Take every chance and every opportunity that's given to you, because there will be a lot. Sometimes there won't be, it'll be a little dry, but there will be opportunities for you. Take every single one you can. I've been fortunate enough in my career so far to have gotten a lot of opportunities, and can say with honestly, I've tried to take as many as I could, and they've been so rewarding for me. Just amazing. Like I've met so many different people, interesting people, cool people. Like I've met some of the best people I've ever met in my life just by taking those opportunities. Like just definitely seek out everything you can. If there's something that you're not quite sure about, do it anyway. Step out of your comfort zone. That's the biggest thing. Step out of your comfort zone.
Shahannah, thank you again. Thank you so much again for coming on the Forever Wingman podcast and being willing to talk about your career field, your career, learn a little bit more about your journey in the Air Force. So thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for having me.